Well, that was a wonderful film. Welcome, and thank you all for coming out again. Vince Staley from Media Impact Funders, and thanks to the National Opera Center for hosting this screening. We probably don't require a lot of introductions here, but we're very privileged to have the general manager of the Metropolitan Opera, Peter Gelb, with us this evening, and the filmmaker of tonight's film, Susan Fromke, with us to talk about it a little bit. Each of them is obviously highly accomplished, and I suspect you all know them well from their biographies, but I'd just say a few things about their careers. And in addition to Ms. Fromke's work with the Met, which has been substantial, she's produced and directed a broad range of documentaries, social documentaries, important work for HBO, including the 14-part Addiction. I think you became addicted to the process and you just kept on it. Learned a lot there, and also a very important project at HBO on the Alzheimer's Project. Of course, Mr. Gelb's credits are vast and impressive. But what I thought was most interesting about looking at both of their bios was the extent to which, for example, Mr. Gelb has done a lot of filmmaking throughout his music management career, and equally, Ms. Fromke has done a tremendous amount of opera, focusing a lot on opera in her filmmaking career. And then, of course, they've done a lot of it together. So there's a body of work that you've done together throughout the years, over 20, 30 years together. And I wonder if this
many
is
years.
Many years, and I wonder maybe if this is sort of in a way a culmination of some of that collaboration, and certainly reflects it in this film. And I wonder if I could just invite both of you to say a few words about what you were trying to accomplish in commissioning and conducting and carrying out this film. So maybe Peter and then Susan.
Well, Susan and I have known each other since I guess it was around 1983. Very good. 3, when we worked together on a film about Seiji Ozawa, and we have known and worked with each other ever since. A lot of my experience working in film and television has helped me in my work as the general manager of the Metropolitan Opera. And since the Metropolitan Opera has, in an effort to advance its status and presence in our efforts to gain a kind of a larger position in mainstream culture for the Met, the multimedia efforts have played a large part in that. So it was perfectly natural, given my background and my relationship with Susan and my respect for her great filmmaking abilities, to ask her if she would do not just this film about the making of The Ring, which is the single biggest undertaking for any opera company, as I'm sure you heard me probably say in the film. I haven't seen it in a while, so I don't remember what I said exactly. But Susan has also made, when I first came to the Met, within the first year or two, I asked her to document other things about the Met. She documented the very first production that inaugurated my first season at the Met of Anthony Minghella's Madame Butterfly, where she made a short film about that. That was shown in one of the intermissions of one of our HD transmissions. She made this feature-length film called The Audition, about the process of young artists competing for careers and ultimately singing on the stage of the Met, an annual competition that the Met sponsors. She made a film about Jimmy Levine that was shown on PBS in commemoration of his 40th anniversary as a music director, and then most recently this. And along the way, other smaller film projects and components of these larger projects that found their way onto public television as well as into movie theaters. So she is, I guess, if there was somebody who was the person who was documenting the life of the Met from a documentarian point of view, it is Susan.
Well, think that's absolutely true. Actually, as it has happened, yes. Well, actually I was in the middle of making the audition. We were just finishing the audition, which was actually a wonderful project because it, first of all, you really got to meet a lot of the people that work at the Met and got to know a lot of the stage directors, stagehands, and a lot of the technical staff backstage. So you started to really develop a relationship with a lot of those individuals. But also, it was just a wonderful way to kind of sink yourself into opera. And it was just we filmed the National Council auditions. It was the year 2007. It was a fabulous year. It was a year that just had a lot of wonderful singers and wonderful personalities. And so it was kind of a joyful project to make. And when we were making it, right at the very end, Peter started talking to me about the fact that he had, that he was commissioning a new ring cycle and that Robert Lepage would be directing it. And right away, it just seemed like a natural to be following, because the little I knew about the ring at that time, I knew that almost every new ring production, has a certain amount of controversy that comes along with it, as well as, anytime you follow the creative process, it's a wonderful journey to go on. And I thought with Robert Lepage, in particular, with his, kind of genius with stage crafting, that it would just be a really interesting film to make, and to see how he would solve some of the problems that Wagner was not able to solve, in the 1870s when he wrote the libretto, but he knew even in his lifetime he couldn't really realize everything that he had dreamt about. So those were kind of the reasons that I thought it would be a great project. And I have to say, I wasn't the least bit disappointed. I felt like all the way through, there was just like never, in terms of a documentary filmmaker, in terms of structure, there was just so much that was going on, that was changing, that was coming up, that was able to make a very interesting narrative. The big difference in this film with all the other films was that Peter Gelb became a subject in the film, which was the first time, and it seemed very early on in the filming that this was a film also about the risk that the Met was taking in bringing these new theatrical productions to life at the Met. And so so that was the big difference, I think, is all of a sudden, instead of us working, side by side, and we had to kind of separate a little bit, because Peter was in fact being filmed a lot and was becoming like a major character in the film.
Unwittingly.
Right.
Well,
at the beginning, at least.
Yeah, and unwillingly.
Yeah. Now, before the film, I had just suggested that a couple of the themes that I've thought about in watching it a few times now is the sort of the innovator's dilemma of a major institution that I think you said, you have to take risks, and that, in a sense, if you take risks, those are risky, and sometimes they work out, and obviously we saw sometimes they don't. But if you stand still, that's the greatest risk. And so I just wonder if, Peter, you could reflect on the challenge of innovation. And also, the other thought was simultaneously then transparency of deciding not only to take these risks, but then to invite the cameras in, right, and allow people to see them.
Well, I think addressing the transparency aspect of it first, I think it's of vital importance as we try to gain a renewed interest in opera, because opera needs greater interest. And I think it's, and we need to find new audiences for opera. And so part of the, I see my mission at the Met as being, is to sort of invite people into the kitchen, so to speak, and see what happens. And how, the Met is such a fascinating institution with so much going on. I don't know if any of you have seen our live transmissions into movie theaters, but last Saturday we were doing a transmission of The Masked Ball, and we had the idea of in the intermissions, which is a lot of audiences really enjoyed not only seeing the opera unfold with moving cameras and close-ups and having the thrill of hearing their favorite singers live, performing on the stage of the Met, but also they enjoy seeing what happens behind the scenes. And so we bring to indulge their interest, just as in this film, which was of course a highly edited and brilliantly made, I think, on Susan's part, artistic endeavor as a film itself. What we do in terms of these live HD shows is the opposite. It's sort of like live reality TV, and we bring the cameras backstage. And you know, we have scripted episodes, but a lot of what happens backstage is unscripted. And we do things, and you know, and all the stagehands are sort of into the spirit of it, and the wardrobe people, some of them wear microphones, some of them don't, and you know, whatever happens sort of backstage happens, and it's very exciting for the audiences. And last Saturday, as I was just starting to say, we actually went down to sea levels, 3 levels below the main stage of the Met, our major rehearsal rooms. And in an effort also to give a sense of what happens at the Met, because it's such a complex operation. It's almost military-like in its precision most of the time. While Bala was being performed on the main stage, we were rehearsing in one room our new English language abridged version of The Barber of Seville, which is our holiday presentation that opens next week. In another room, we were rehearsing Les Troyens. And in another room, we were rehearsing our brand new production of Maria Stuarda, an opera that was written by Donizetti in the 1830s that has never been performed at the Met before, starring Joyce DiDonato. So we actually went into the rehearsal of Maria Stuarda. We had warned the cast that we would do that, and timed it so that we could actually have a live performance in rehearsal of Maria Stuarda in the intermission, taking place in the overall context of the larger performance of Ballo that was taking place on the main stage. The point I'm making is that I believe that by revealing, in answer to your question, by revealing the inner workings of the Met with all these, because the Met is the home of all these incredibly talented people who are giving every ounce of their artistic energy and all of their energy, whether they're stagehands or the biggest superstars in the world. To see this all unfolding behind the scenes is very exciting, and it really opens a door for not just opera lovers, but also for new audiences.
And do you have any way of gauging whether that's working, that that's a belief you have that demystifying the reality of opera behind the scenes will actually draw people in? And
well, I know for a fact that we have a huge, we have quadrupled our paying audience through these live transmissions into movie theaters. And
just to give the audience a sense of that, I believe the number I saw was from the 07 year, something like 320,000 to roughly 3 million last year, so a tenfold increase.
Close to 3 million, but I mean the point. But when you think about, the biggest challenge for, and I don't want to dominate the floor anymore. I'm sorry, Susan, you should ask Susan a question. But the biggest challenge I think for any opera company today is how do you increase capacity without going into a football stadium or something, which ruins the artistic effort. So what we've managed to do with these HD transmissions is to create satellite opera houses in movie theaters and performing arts centers around the world, ranging in size from the Auditorio Nacional in Mexico City, where 6,000 people can watch a live transmission of the Met, to a little movie theater in the Arctic Circle in Tromsø, Norway, that seats 125. So we have our 700,000 member audience at the Met that attends the Met during the season is now 4 times as large, basically, through this global initiative.
It's if you haven't experienced it, it's really quite something recent. The Othello and the Tempest were really eye-opening for me. But maybe if I could take the opportunity to come back to you, Susan. If you just look at those 2 films, The Audition, if it was the last, or a recent film, which was bound up in all those personal dramas, and spoiler alert, there's some really powerful and touching drama in it. It's a really lovely movie. We had an opportunity to talk about that with the Philanthropy New York screening a couple of years back. I'd really advise renting it or getting on Netflix. But how do you approach this subject, which is very different, epic scale, institutional sort of challenges? How is that different as a movie to make?
Well, in many ways, it's very similar in terms of the approach, where and certainly with the audition, what was different about that, I would say, is that you couldn't really do too much research. You know, all of us, you met the singers when they came in for the semifinals, and you were meeting them for the first time, most of the time. We filmed one or two of the regional competitions, but I would say that you know, the week that they came in for the semifinals, that they had a week of semifinals, and then they had another week with the finalists for the grand finals. You had to meet the singers very quickly and develop almost instant relationships with them, and very quickly figure out who you would be following, who were the people that some of the singers didn't really want to be filmed, but others really wanted to be filmed, and allowed you to get very close to them. And so you started to figure out where the storylines were just very quickly, and that was very different. With this film, there was, you know, we started at the very beginning of the process, and so it really was a very slow evolution to see this.
How many years then from start
it was really 4 years from start to completion, and it was really when we first arrived in Quebec City, it was the very first workshop for the Ring Cycle, and Robert and his team were just coming up with this concept of the machine, of this, you know, machine, and watching that evolution, and, you know, trying to figure out, you know, is it even possible? You know, I mean, following all of that, that was really kind of what started to shape it. And then that was like 2 years, and then all of a sudden when it arrived at the Met, it was a very different story, because there was a whole learning curve that the Metropolitan Opera's stagehands had to go through. The Met had to kind of start to take ownership of the machine, and then the singers came in, and then that was a whole nother level of you know, characters and stories that we had to start developing. So it was a very big project, and really the whole idea was trying to figure out, you know, what were the storylines once again to follow, and try to edit them down so you weren't just following too many characters, because that's a big danger.
Yeah, one of the things that I think runs through this whole discussion is the role of new media and technology, both in creating a new production, and it reflects that sort of the new capacity of the stage to be a projected screen, but also all of the other screens that people use to witness the event. And so the film is one experience of the event, this film, but also all of the HD broadcasts of the full Ring. And I just wonder, for both of you, does the screen audience, is that different? Are you producing all of these productions? Are you thinking of the audience in the house and the audience in the various screens, and how do you balance those?
Well, I mean, obviously, that's a question that separates the live transmissions from the documentary film that Susan made. But in the case of the live transmissions, and this is a question I'm asked all the time, is, you know, how do we adapt our stage productions for the screen? And the answer is very, very little. I mean, there is a first of all, we don't have time to adapt. You know, the Met is so busy. We have the time is our enemy, in that we're constantly racing against the clock to finish rehearsals, to get performances up. We couldn't transmit our shows any other way than live. And as a rule, I don't allow them to be since I have ultimate responsibility for what goes on the stage as well as what goes on the screen, I, you know, sort of have reached a decision with myself that we're not going to do anything in the theater that will in any way have a negative impact upon what the original direction, the stage director's ideas are, and the designer's ideas are in terms of what the audience in the Opera House should experience, until after a show opens. And then, you know, the fourth or fifth performance will be when we will start figuring out how to modify it to the degree, only to the degree necessary to make it work on camera.
Okay.
So, and what we do to modify it is typically changing light levels and maybe make the, you know, the color of somebody's makeup that might not, you know, it might look perfectly fine.
I just wonder if sometimes the productions, by design or by coincidence, happen to work better for the screen audience or the home audience? I've only had the opportunity to see The Ring
Right.
on my home screen, and it seems brilliant to me.
Well, some do and some don't. You know, some work better than others. But we certainly, what I don't do is tell a director or designer this is going to be on HD, so make sure you design it so it looks good on camera.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the fact of the matter is that, you know, the way these productions are created is to be seen by an audience sitting in seats facing a proscenium portal. You know, they're not designed to be filmed in all multiple directions like movies are. So everything has to look good from the perspective of the audience in the house. Some can be seen with greater degrees of angles of cameras. For example, The Ring, because it is so angular and architectural, does look interesting when you shoot it from side angles as well as straight on. But almost every show has to be shot straight on from the perspective of the audience in the theater.
I just wonder, Susan, from your perspective then, or you're looking at the same dynamic sort of as a documentarian, do you see any tension or any, you know, this collision of the opera house and the new media environment? Do you see it playing out either the way a singer is acting or any
I did not witness any of that. There was now we primarily did not film during an HD broadcast because those were the days we wouldn't be filming because there's just too much going on backstage, and we didn't need to. We were almost always filming like opening nights or closing nights.
Yeah.
Those were more the times we were filming in. But I never, you know, these singers, they're so professional. I didn't feel like there was any. Peter will know this answer better than me, though. You know, whether a singer, whether there's heightened tension during the HD broadcast.
Well, there's a great deal of heightened tension. But I mean, the difference between shooting a documentary is that you can deliberately cross the line, and you want to shoot things from odd and strange angles that the audience in the front of the house isn't seeing. And shots like that you've seen in this film.
Yeah.
But as far as acting is concerned, you know, one of the great advantages of the HD programs is that there is a greater, and this is more kind of just, it's a coincidence of timing in a way, partly because today opera singers know that part of their responsibility is to be good actors. I mean, within the limitations of the huge technical demands that they have to sing brilliantly. But, you know, the average opera singer today, the average star today, if there is such a thing as an average opera star. But an opera star today knows that they have to give a performance that is convincing, not just musically, but also theatrically. And that is essential in the same way that, you know, a performance on the stage, Broadway today is very different than it was, say, 40 or 50 years ago. Or a movie performance is different today than it was, you know, 40 or 50 years ago. Acting in opera has become more nuanced, and we do not, you know, what we want on the stage of the Met is great acting, if possible. And what we don't expect singers to modify their performances, their acting performances, because the cameras are there or not. The effect of the cameras is very positive for their acting, though, because they know that they have to stay in character if they're smart all the time, because a camera might pick them up when they're not singing. And that's what directors all want from singers. They want them to not just be thinking about the lines they're singing, but thinking about the lines that are being sung to them, which is the difference between a good acting performance and not a good acting performance.
I'm going to invite the audience to also offer questions too, but maybe one more for...
Well, the only other thing I would just say, though, is that the adrenaline, the excitement of singing on an HD show in front of an audience of several 100,000 people invariably raises the level of a performance. We always get our best performances on a Saturday matinee, even though singers hate singing in the daytime. So
now, with all of these opportunities and the different, you know, the challenges we've been talking about, do you have a different... how does that affect your discussion with funders? With, you know, when somebody comes in and offers, Ann Ziff and her family offer to underwrite a production of this scale, can you say about what that dialogue is like? Does it change the way you talk about your work with the changing opportunities?
In terms of media?
In terms of the discussion with funders, with foundations,
Well, I think that,
donors.
For us, the most important thing is our relationship with donors is such that we let them know our artistic plans and hope that something that we're doing will pique the interest of a particular donor. We do not invite the donors to participate in the artistic planning process. But we're very fortunate that someone like Ann Ziff and her family were so eager to embrace a project as huge as the Ring. I don't know how we could have done it without them, actually, because they were on board at the earliest stages of the planning of it.
Any questions from something sparked in the movie?
How can we see the films that you've done, or recommend that our nephews see this, for example, when they live across the country?
What, this film?
Yeah.
This film is available on Blu-ray and DVD
Okay.
via Universal.
Audition?
The audition was released by the Met's own label, I think, and is available on the Met through the Met gift shop or via the Met's website. And Susan and I, over the years, actively collaborated on a number of very interesting projects where we learned a lot about artistic temperament. We worked with Vladimir Horowitz, who I managed, and made 2 or 3 projects with him. We made a film about the return of Rostropovich and his wife, Galina Vishnevskaya, who died today, I read.
Oh my gosh.
When they returned out of exile to the Soviet Union. We made films about Kathy Battle and Wynton Marsalis collaborating.
You also worked
Bulgaria?
on the, at least in your work, the Met's earlier Ring, producing that.
Right, I did. In the late '80s, I was working as a freelance producer on the Met's television projects. That's when I first learned how to
And did
how to
that
produce the Ring.
inform this? I mean, everything
Well,
informs
everything
else.
everything I've done has informed my work today. But certainly, I learned the Ring through that experience.
Lauren?
Picking up on your funder.
Is there a mic? It might be helpful. Or, yeah, okay. Great. I think that would be helpful.
Thank you. Thank you for coming this evening and sharing your thoughts with us. Many decades ago, I had an opportunity to be involved on the funding side of the television production of the Bayreuth Ring for Great Performances, which of course was aesthetically 180 degrees from this and was done as a good work rather than something that anyone ever thought would really increase audience for opera. So it was so long ago, I was wondering if it was at all in your consciousness when you began the project or thought about the difference in the productions.
Well, you want to talk about that one, or you? This is the Patrice Chéreau Ring.
At one point in the documentary, we actually we thought that we were just going to be filming initially through Rheingold, and in that version of the film, we really thought that we would start to talk about some of the earlier productions, and that was one of the productions that we were going to be talking about. But then in the end, once we started filming Rheingold, and at the same time, Lepage's team and the Met were teching Valkyrie, and so we started filming quite a bit of Valkyrie, and we met Deborah Voigt, and we thought, wow, we have to include Brunhilde, and then we just kept going, and so that's the way the project evolved. So we didn't, in the end, start to really, we wanted to kind of set the stage for people who didn't understand how important a Ring production was, to really give them that knowledge and to see that over history there have been 5 or 6 seminal productions that are very, very important in the kind of history of all Ring productions, and that was certainly one of them that we were going to focus on.
And Lepage studied the Chéreau Ring. I mean, he certainly is aware of it. He's researched all of the rings that have been available on video, and I know he was very struck by the use of smoke in the Chéreau Ring. And for me, going back to when I was producing the previous Met Ring, it was right around the time that the Chéreau Ring was being shown on PBS. And which is partly what inspired me to try to do something different in the programming of the Met Ring back in the 80s, because the Chereau Ring, if I recall correctly, was spread out over a series of weeks. It was like an hour a night or something. And what I did was go to PBS and say I wanted PBS to broadcast all 4 of the Met Rings on 4 consecutive nights, sort of as a different kind. It was, in those days, I think even before the expression programming stunt existed, that was an early example of a programming stunt on PBS, where you have a block of broadcasting days, which was
That
sort
must
of
have worked. You did it again this year, right? Or they did it.
Well, we did it again this year with PBS, partly based upon the evidence that we'd done it once before. So.
Perfect. Great. Yeah, please.
Another of the overarching themes in the film, there are many, is about mechanical failure, human error, human failure. And it's very interesting to watch you, Peter, looking for lessons of crisis management, although you don't go too deeply really into that. I was wondering if you happened to be filming the night one of the Valkyries had the accident on the machine or not, and if so, would you have included that at all in the
Well, actually, we talked about including it. The problem is that there wasn't...
We didn't film that night.
I was there that night.
I was there that night, too. Were you there that night?
No,
Oh.
I know that you called her sure she was all right.
Right.
What I did. Yeah, right. I was backstage as soon as it happened. But the...
I was there, actually.
Right. I mean, it would have been, it could have, it certainly would not, we didn't exclude it from the film. In fact, at one point we were looking to see if there was some archival footage of it, which didn't seem to exist.
Well, we were hoping that maybe that the house camera had, had captured it, but it hadn't been recording that night because it wasn't an opening night.
But there's no reason why, if it had been shot, it could have certainly been included in the film.
I'm just curious about the new technology that you were envisioning,
Sure.
how that might have or would have facilitated this production if you had something to do.
Oh, the technology that you've read about? Well, and the technology that we're working towards will enable us to work on a daily basis to accommodate more advanced productions. I can't imagine anything that we permanently install that will be as advanced as what we temporarily installed with the Ring, because that, and in fact, the legacy, the technological legacy of the Ring remains with us. First of all, we're bringing it back this spring, but we now have a computer server room where we have cabling that runs to our various projector positions, and we have acquired, because of the Ring and because of some other new productions that need them, we now have about 15 different super powerful projectors that belong to the Met. So in a way, the Ring brought home to us the point about how far behind the Met was lagging. I mean, it really, at a certain point, as I think the story in the Times pointed out, our technology would reach the point where it's not even safe. I mean, it's really, nothing has been changed except for these 2 moving stage wagons since 1966.
So do the new innovations that you're able to take on, maybe you said in the film that you sort of leapfrog from being behind the times to being ahead of the times. Do the things that are new and state-of-the-art, can you then get them spread out throughout the field? Can other opera companies and other communities take on, or is the Met so big and so different that whatever you do, HD, whatever, can you build the rest of the field, all of the other members of Opera America?
Well, I think, it's difficult to do what we're doing in HD for other companies simply because in order for it to be not an economic drain, it has to have a large enough audience that it can provide a flow of positive profits or provide profits. Yeah, I think that my hope is that I think there are certain opera companies in this country that really feel that what the Met has done has been very helpful. I think there are other companies that feel that we have been less than helpful. I think I'd like to believe that it's the more imaginative companies that are doing the more interesting work in commissioning and really connecting locally with their communities that are not threatened by what we're doing. If anything, they think it's a good thing because it raises the profile for opera in general. And in their creative efforts, they are tying into it in a way that enhances the opera experience. I mean, there are companies, for example, like the Santa Fe Opera that actually, of course, it's easy for them because they have a summer season, which is the opposite of ours, where they actually outfitted a local vaudeville movie theater house in historic Santa Fe and set it up so that they could be the presenter of the Met in the season. So I think, but obviously there are, we ourselves suffer a certain degree of cannibalization of sales inside the Opera House because of the success of the HD. But overall, I think it's been a very positive, has had very positive impact on the whole operatic scene. It's raised the profile of opera. It's made opera more exciting. It's made it more part of mainstream culture, and I think those are all good things.
Do you think the theater audiences and HD theater audiences, are they new people to the opera experience, or have they just left their radio at home and gone out to the theater for the afternoon?
I think it really varies. There are certain. On the one hand, I think it has extended the life of certain opera goers who no longer have the energy or inclination to come to New York or to a major city to experience opera. It makes it easier for this older audience to still get to go to the opera, where otherwise they might not get to see it at all. On the other hand, it also is introducing younger people to opera. So we have both.
And do the two of you have another film in mind? Is there something else?
Well, we're going to go out to dinner and discuss one. Right?
Well, all right. I don't want to keep you from dinner or the next film. So I think thank you very much for coming out to talk to us.
Thank you very much.
And if I could just really once again thank our hosts here at the Opera America, the National Opera Center, this lovely new facility, and my co-hosts for the evening, Carrie McCarthy from the New York Community Trust with Grantmakers in the Arts, and her colleagues, Cheryl Rosario from American Express, and all of you for coming out.
And I would also like to join you in thanking Opera America for its valuable role, and to all of you who are supporting the arts. We need your help, so thank you very much.
Thanks.